Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. You have reached Venus Unplugged. And what we do here is we explore all levels of the Venusian energy. Venus as a principle of love, personal love, transpersonal love. Whatever has to do with Venus has to do with us, including her dark side, the dark Venus. Her Avengers are quite amazing. Today in particular, New York and the United States remembers and recalls and reflects upon 9/11 and talk about shadow action. That's one result of an unprocessed shadow. Enemies kill the enemy, the infidels. One side projects their patriotic shadow onto another, and who are innocent. See, the ideologies fight, but most of the time people are pretty innocent. They're just trying to live their lives, and here this, on this day, it was also a day I was here. I was conceived in New York, and I'll probably be in the tomb, from womb to tomb, New Yorker. And I know we're like dinosaurs in our existence, not because of insensitivity. New Yorkers happen to be very kind, but they get a bad reputation. And on that day, walking around and experiencing the fall, it was like you knew you were never, ever, ever going to be the same. And for people that were not directly affected by this, but certainly in their empathy they felt it, or it could be any time in our lives. An event happens. It could be a catastrophe. It could be falling in love. It could be falling out of love, a death, whatever it might be, one of life's great changes. And there's no greater initiation than death, that's for sure. Falling in love comes pretty close because, in a sense, the ego dies for at least 6 months as we fall in love, and all that energy, that libido, that divine madness comes up from the unconscious that we didn't even know we had. People can't believe they act in such ways, and they do, because that's part of who we are. So today, I'd like to, in this day of reflection, I'd like to talk about the bright shadow. What comes out of the shadow? What comes out of the work of integration? Because that's the only true noble effect we can have in this world. If we really, really want to change this world, get into the work of integration of our opposites, becoming conscious of the shadow, both dark and light, seeing what goes on inside that triggers the shadow, or how we get hooked or hoodwinked into other people's shadows because it sounds so noble. Oh, yes, I'll go fight for them. Do you really believe in that? Or is there another way? Because the first and most foremost way is to become conscious if you really want to change things. And you want to change the nature of love and to have love and give love. So, Jung maintains that our only hope of holding the blind, hysterical masses in check is for enough people to contain the opposites within themselves instead of either swinging violently from one extreme to the other or projecting the undesirable opposite upon our outer enemy. We do not yet know the extent to which a relatively few integrated individuals can break the force of a rising storm. but the impetus is not that of how many can do or the numbers makes it superior, nor in the fields of action. Their healing effect is in the unconscious, which we all share. That's where the power is. So you can do something. You have to work at it every single day in some form. And maybe the working is the realization you didn't want to work on it today. But every day, every moment, we're facing an opposite within ourselves. So it's about, to accept one's personal shadow means to accept responsibility for its behavior, not necessarily the license to live and put it in practice, all we find within. This is the common fallacy. It demands not only self-knowledge, but the utmost vigilance to see it and does not break us unawares. And if we should, to call it back and make amends and admit very humbly that this unruly shadow is a bit of me. That's what maturity is. That's what spirituality is on earth. Here, this is what we need to change. When we're projecting, and at least be able to go question it, okay? What one does, one is. Not what one says or thinks, but what one does. Doing may be a concern of an inner, invisible process, which we call being, but is still what, in fact, one does. Though, of course, the quality of being will depend on the value of our actions and our influences. Now, it may sometimes be wisdom to use one's shadows deliberately. Anger is a shadow quality, and in our well-behaved society, but consciously directed, it can move mountains. When we use the anger to direct, it can turn into wisdom. It's not an acting out. It's seeing an injustice. It's if you see something, you say something. Or, you just go nah, that's not cool. Not cool. You don't have to give a speech. Or you disengage. But when we're using the shadow consciously, we know that we're using it consciously because the anger or the rage can come up. We can utilize it, and then it goes back down. When it keeps on going, then you're possessed by the shadow. It's whoa, that really enrages me. Let's say in the instance of bullying. No, that doesn't work. Say what you need to say or do what you need to do or start a campaign. But the anger isn't the thing it will be the thing that ignites the fire to make the change. But the wisdom and the compassion and the opportunity, because bullying definitely is shadow, and there's all sorts of bullying. Remember last week when I mentioned, when somebody is being very aggressive, that's to hide their vulnerability. And that's to hide their weakness, so they become very aggressive. It's nerve-wracking. It's calm it down, man. What are you so aggressive about? But once you realize, that other person is really feeling really vulnerable, and this is their mask. They don't want to feel that, so they're trying to override. Or when someone won't let you get a word in edgewise. So just sit down, watch the performance piece, listen to the shadow talk, be able to determine what is true of the person and what is not. And when we have those, arguments in our head and you're absolutely right and they're absolutely wrong, nope, you're possessed because nobody's absolutely right or wrong. There are sides. And the hardness of heart is another shadow quality. And the people who are hard in life without knowing and without intention may cause much misery for others and themselves. Yet there are moments when the use of one's hard, unyielding shadow is the one thing necessary to save the situation. We need at times to use our shadow, but to never be its victim. So the hardness of heart is what I call ruthless compassion. There are times you just need to say no. It's just no. If you're always helping someone and they never get it, they just don't get it. A time must come when you must say no. Because in saying no, they have to deal with their resources. They need to find out whether they sink or swim. And everybody has resources. The bright part of the shadow are our resources, our talents, which we never got to. So it is only if we are truly centered that we can be trusted to use our shadow qualities spontaneously in the right time and the right place. There's an old Chinese saying, when the wrong man does the right thing, it will turn out wrong, says the Chinese saying. And when the right man does the wrong thing, it will turn out right. So it's about centeredness, being correct within. So everything that it requires us, the more conscious we are and the more centered we are and the more we take on the integration of those opposites inside of us. And it is no easy task, believe me. I've been at it for 30 years, and I'm still like, whoa, look at this. But at least I know as best I can. You see, life, it's awesome, and it's shadow, and it's light, and it's living, and it's just amazing. Life insists on being loved. And anything that belongs to one's life, which is allowed to lie dormant, has to be lived by somebody else. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Life insists on being lived, and anything that belongs to one's life, which is allowed to lie dormant, has to be lived by somebody else. If we do not accept our shadow, we force our children to carry the burden of our undeveloped capacities. They may become mediocre scientists or artists because we denied our own talents. They may become doctors, which they are not suited to be, because we failed to use our innate capacity for healing. Or inept politicians to fulfill our own unlived ambitions. Talk about terrorism. There's emotional terrorism right there. Our interconnectedness does not end with the family. We all meet in the unconscious. We all meet in the unconscious. So how many people have been hung or died or murdered by the mass consciousness? Merely because nobody could speak the truth. How many men have been hanged for murder or electrocuted merely because they were weak recipients of the murderous shadow of the whole race? Kind of like a mass hysteria happens. You know, and it's like, burn the witch. Wasn't a witch, but died nonetheless. That's the mass hysteria of the collective unconscious. There would be fewer murders if we could all acknowledge within ourselves how easy it would be for any one of us to kill. And, you know, in wartime, which seems to be all the time, since the 20th century, in wartime we explain our brutality in some other way. In peacetime, we forget and some men and women are slightly weaker than the rest. And they get victimized, they get projected upon. And there are people who reverse that and just say, well, you're projecting on me, it's your projection, and we're not. But when you know, you know. It's not a belief, you know. It's not an ego trip, you just know. And it's like, it's heart-based, it's someplace, and as I said, the heart isn't just sentimental, because that's not heart love, that's sentimental, that's a half-baked emotion. But when you know, in the depth of your knowing, very often you have no idea of what you know, okay? So, the bright shadow, that's when we have abilities that we don't know that we have. We have talents that we don't know that we have. And we begin to, well, very often it's like, oh, no, I can't do that. My brother can do that, or my mother can do that, or my nephew can do that, okay? No, you can do that. Take out the time. That's also, taking back your gold. Where did you leave your gold? Where did you leave your bright shadow onto somebody else? That's your talent and ability. And that's what is so interesting when we recognize that. So, the witch within, and we all have a witch, the witch is chiefly the woman's responsibility, because we have one. Men have something else. Although, certainly a man's negative anima can be a witch, but we're not splitting hairs here. We are just working on what we can cut. See, even when we want to, yeah, but what about them? As soon as somebody says, yeah, but what about them? Yeah, I did that, but what did they do? It's like, no. That's projecting the shadow instead of just saying, okay, as soon as we say yes, okay, I am going to look at this. We take full responsibility for what we disowned. And believe me, you are going to get gold out of that. And what is the gold? The gold is the consciousness. And out of the consciousness of that comes the wisdom, comes the forgiveness, comes the and the right use of shadow. We want it active. We want it conscious. We want to be aware and to also know when to use it. One of my favorite stories about Jung was that he was once asked, did he believe in shock treatment? And he said, he had a big Swiss accent. He said, yes, of course he did. Absolutely. But he believed in the human kind. And he said, when someone would come at him with a negative anima or animus, he would just growl. Just his warm, human, kind of animal, instinctual growl was all he needed to do. So growl. We live in an extroverted thinking country here in America, and feeling value is extremely important. It's what we value. The emotions are emotions are something that come from the body. We can't do it. Just it's there. But it's the feeling. Yes, this really pisses me off. But I am going to growl and let the person know this is not the moment. Your timing's bad. Find it, if you can, when somebody approaches you with something and you experience it as obnoxious, you can say, is there another way you can ask this? Or is there another way that you can say this, because the way that you're saying it now, I want to kill you. That's as far as we get with consciousness. Because no miracles, on Broadway. There's just that moment where you've been triggered. And like I talked about in other episodes, and our fourth function, our inferior function, is how evil gets into our life. That's the weak. we need to develop that. So if a person is a heavy thinking type, and they're talking to a feeling type, guaranteed they're going to say something that's just going to, devastate. They can't feel it, so they don't know the impact. And before you strike out or get wounded, perhaps you could say, are you aware of how that sounds? Is your purpose to wound? And with the utmost innocence, it's like, no, I'm just telling you the truth. Well, that's all, many people have been smacked upside their head for their supposed truth. And we can never be inside. I mean, I think that's also one of the greatest frustrations about loving. We truly don't know that other person, not deep inside, because every day they're new, as you are. And hopefully you're new because you reflected, or you had a dream, or you had an insight, or whatever. It's growing. This is all about growing. Right to the day we leave this planet, we are growing, and then beyond. So this is very, very important. It's how are we going to use the bright side of the shadow, which is the part, the witch is the one that doesn't want us to have the bright side of a shadow internally. So we need to get into contact with the unconscious, which is in touch with this power. See, below the shadow is yet another realm. These are like realms within realms. And we can't always understand them intellectually. It's kind of on a feeling level. So the life force which surges up through women is a tremendous power, whether employed biologically or in some other way. And let's say the negative use of the shadow or the witch is when it's a suffocating quality. She pours out energy on those she loves and she cares about, and does not know that she suffocates. Giving feels like love, but giving without measure and without discrimination stifles. It is when a woman actually uses the power with which the feminine is in contact with for her own personal ends that she becomes truly witch. There is real evil which needs all our resources to fight. And I suspect there are a few women who will not find a witch lurking somewhere within themselves. We've all got one, if we dig deep enough. Now, it can be used in a positive way to heal. Okay. So we need to understand that the deeply buried feminine in us, who is concerned with the unbroken connection of all growing things, is in passionate revolt against the stultifying, life-destroying, anonymous machine of civilization we have built. So she can be consumed with an inner rage, which is buried in a layer of the unconscious, often too deep for us to recognize. She becomes destructive of anything and everything, sometimes violently and very often subtle, passive obstructions. Now, it is often this inner protest that breaks out in neurotic illnesses and sensitive men as well as in women, or turns destructive in places where it is not intended. With more consciousness, feminine anger could be harnessed into creative end. And that's what we're going for. So when one feels rage and stays connected to the rage, and the rage becomes the identity, then you're going deeper and deeper into the unconscious, and you're hooked. You actually get possessed by the witch. People do witchy things. You know the difference. And I'm not talking about people whose religion is paganism. They are witches, like literally they're witches. And that's their religion. It's their earth religion. It's what they belong. But the shadow aspect of that is the revengeful aspect. Instead of bringing, if we bring our lives into balance, that is the natural protection. And the protection isn't we can be bliss ninnies and not know anything. The protection is we are aware of what's coming at us. We can name it. We can see it for what it is. It is dangerous to be one-sided and only want bright light and goodness, because somewhere along the line, you're calling in its opposite. Because whether we like it or not, there is evil in the world. Look at what people do to one another. Look what countries do to one another. That's not the fault of humanity. In the whole Judeo-Christian, humans got blamed for the great guilt and sin of what? Of consciousness. Eve wanted consciousness. She bit the apple. There's a whole chain of misthoughts and power and really weird stuff with that particular mythos. The truth of the matter is, humanity isn't that powerful to be the source of all evil in the world. No, there is. We can fall under or within evil's nature, and we don't even know it. But by denying evil, you're also voting for it. And I'm not saying to be terrified. I'm just saying, shit happens. And when we swing the other way, that we only want good and we only want the... No, we want the balance. We want to be able to recognize, and this is what Jung's work is all about, the tension of the opposites. Bringing that is. So part of the bright shadow is when we realize our bright shadows lay dormant possibilities and are oblivious, and also we need both of them for the welfare of the whole. So this is where your power comes from. Not from a God above or a God below or to the left or to the east, but in that part of us, in the shadow aspect, is incredible feminine spiritual quality. Who knows deep sanity? And we need to go get that. So, our personal responsibility for the outer world may seem, infinitesimal. But taking individual responsibility for our own personal shadow, dark and light, is a small, attainable achievement, though it demands a lifetime's determination and a lifetime of courage. And we are all connected beneath the surface. Our little individual pebbles of consciousness may be sent ripple to the farther shore. Bye.
Napa know-how. The Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's technically old enough to vote and the windows are powered by the strength of your left arm? Your monthly payment is zero, and it'll stay that way. Because with over 500,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. She may not be pretty, but she's all yours. That's Napa know-how. Napa know-how.